The $300 Wagyu ribeye sat in the center of our Italian marble island, the marbling beginning to congeal as the temperature dropped. I didn't touch it. Instead, I sat in the high-backed leather chair of my home office, the blue light of my dual monitors reflecting off the 18-karat gold of the Cartier love bracelet I'd bought myself that afternoon. It was a $7,000 reminder that I didn't need a man to provide for me. I was the provider. At 8:14 p.m., my husband, Mark, finally answered my third call. The background noise was a cocktail of clinking crystal and the low hum of expensive conversation. "I told you, Sarah, I'm buried at the firm," he snapped, his voice tight with a performative stress he hadn't earned. "There's a deadline on the merger. I'll eat out with the partners. I'll bring you a burger on my way home." "I have a $300 dinner waiting, Mark," I said. My voice was like a dial tone, flat, consistent, and cold. "Then eat it." He dismissed me, his tone shifting to the patronizing lilt he used when he thought I was being emotional. "I'm doing real work here. I don't have time to worry about the kitchen. I'll see you at 10. The line went dead. I didn't get angry. I didn't throw the Wagyu in the trash. I simply looked at the gift-wrapped box sitting on the counter, a $5,000 Zenith watch I'd planned to give him for Valentine's Day. I realized then that I wasn't his wife. I was his silent benefactor. He was playing the role of the high-powered executive, but the script was written on my letterhead, and the stage was funded by my bank account. I reached out and pulled his iPad toward me. He'd left it on the island, a careless mistake from a man who had grown too comfortable in his impunity. He didn't think I'd look. He thought I was the plain wife, the hobbyist designer who handled the domestic logistics while he conquered the world. I didn't need his password. I pay the $9.99 monthly family cloud subscription. I am the administrator of our digital lives. With 3 taps, I was inside. And that's when I saw the rooftop gala. The digital trail didn't just reveal infidelity, it revealed a hierarchy. In his messages, I wasn't Sarah. I was the situation at home. I was the anchor he claimed was dragging him down while he used my oxygen to breathe. I sat there, the Cartier bracelet feeling heavy and cold against my wrist. For years, I had played the role of the supportive partner. I'd intentionally dimmed my own light so he wouldn't feel overshadowed. I'd let him believe his firm was the primary engine of our life, even though my design consultancy brought in 3 times his salary. I had fallen for the oldest trap in the book. I thought that by making his life easy, I was making our love strong. But as I scrolled through photos of him at the gala, the one he told me was strictly for senior partners and too boring for someone like you, I saw the truth. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a patron. He was wearing the suit I'd bought him, standing in front of a city skyline I had given him access to, laughing with a workmate whose dress likely cost less than the Wagyu congealing on my counter. The heartbreak didn't come in a wave. It arrived as a calculation. I viewed our marriage as a balance sheet, and for the first time, I looked at the bottom line. Mark was a toxic asset. He was all overhead and 0 ROI. He had mistaken my silence for simplicity, and my generosity for a lack of options. I looked at the $5,000 watch. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to scream. I felt the sharp, professional thrill of a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover. He wanted to play the executive? Fine. I was about to show him how a real boss handles a breach of contract. The Mark I met 5 years ago was a consultant with a leased Honda and a wardrobe full of polyester blend suits. He had potential, or so I thought. He had that hungry, sharp-edged ambition that I mistook for drive. I was already established, my firm pulling in a consistent 7 figures, but I wanted a partner to build an empire with. I didn't realize I was just hiring an actor to play the part. Over the next 60 months, I didn't just love him. I rebranded him. I moved him into my 4,000 square foot penthouse. I introduced him to the partners at the firm he now claims is burying him with work. Partners who only gave him a second look because they wanted my design firm's contract. I traded his Honda for a $95,000 Audi A8, registered under my holding company for tax purposes. I curated his closet with bespoke Italian wool and handmade Oxfords. I essentially paid for his personality. Whenever he had a bad quarter, I covered the shortfall so he wouldn't lose face. I told myself it was an investment in our collective future. The breakdown of our expenses over the last 2 years was staggering. Housing, $144,000. 0% contributed by Mark. Transportation/maintenance, $32,000. All corporate leased. Travel/leisure, $55,000. Mostly charged to my black card. His executive image, $18,000 in tailoring and memberships. Total investment, $249,000. While I was doing the heavy lifting, Mark was busy curating a narrative where he was the protagonist and I was the background noise. He started referring to my penthouse as our place, and my connections as his network. He'd become so accustomed to the luxury I provided that he'd forgotten who signed the checks. He thought he was the lion because I'd given him the mane and the roar. He didn't realize that the moment I stopped feeding him, he was just a house cat with an expensive haircut. He had mistaken my quiet competence for a lack of ambition, never realizing that I wasn't just his wife. I was his landlord, his benefactor, and his sole source of credit. The conditioning was subtle. It started with small comments about my unassuming nature. Mark would tell me that I was too pure for the shark-infested waters of his corporate world. "Stay home, relax, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "You've worked hard enough. Let me handle the networking. These people are shallow. They wouldn't appreciate someone as grounded as you." It sounded like protection. It was actually isolation. He was creating a plain wife persona for me, a safe domestic background for his shiny new life. He wanted me in the home office, hidden away like a family secret, while he used my success to fuel his ego in the city's most exclusive rooms. He'd frame my absence from events as a choice I made because I was too tired or not interested in the drama, when in reality, he was terrified I'd show up and the partners would realize who the real power player was. He gaslit me into believing that my silence was my greatest virtue. He convinced me that my value lay in being his rock, the steady, unmoving object that allowed him to be the unstoppable force. By keeping me quiet, he ensured I wouldn't hear the whispers. By keeping me at home, he ensured I wouldn't see the way he looked at the younger associates. He wasn't protecting my peace, he was protecting his stage. The iPad screen stayed lit, a glowing indictment of 5 years of misplaced trust. I swiped through the workmate thread. Her name was Elena. She was 24, a junior analyst at his firm, and according to their message history, she thought Mark was a self-made titan living in a penthouse he'd bought with his first big bonus. There was a photo from that night, 10:02 p.m. Mark was holding a crystal tumbler of Macallan, leaning in close to her on a rooftop overlooking the skyline. The caption he'd sent her read, "Finally, some real conversation. My wife is a saint, but she's just not built for this world. She's happy with her sketches and her quiet life. I need more." I looked at the date. He had sent that while I was wire transferring $12,000 to his personal account to cover his unexpected tax bill. The gala wasn't a corporate mandate. It was an open invite industry mixer. He hadn't been buried at the firm. He'd been in the penthouse shower for 45 minutes, using my $80 Joe Malone body wash before dressing in the $3,000 suit I'd picked out for him. The betrayal wasn't the flirting. It was the theft of my identity. He had taken the life I built and sold it to Elena as his own achievement, while casting me as the plain burden he was too noble to leave. He was auditioning my replacements, using my own resources as the stage. I felt a click in my chest. Not a break, a lock sliding into place. I didn't close the iPad. I left it exactly where it was. I walked over to the kitchen island, picked up the $300 cold Wagyu, and walked it to the trash. I wasn't the saint anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit was going to be brutal. I didn't go to bed. I went to my office and pulled the black file, the physical folder where I keep the corporate filings for my holding company, Aura Design Group. Mark had forgotten the cardinal rule of power. He who owns the assets owns the outcome. Because I had been the one navigating the complexities of our high net worth lifestyle, I had structured everything for maximum protection. Mark liked the prestige of the executive life, but he found the paperwork tedious. He had signed every document I put in front of him over the years with a distracted flourish, too busy checking his reflection to read the fine print. I opened my laptop and began a clinical liquidation of his existence. The transportation. I logged into the GPS tracking portal for the Audi A8. It was currently parked at a luxury apartment complex 3 miles away, Elena's building. I drafted a remote command to the vehicle's secondary key system. The housing. I reviewed the lease for the penthouse. It was in the name of my corporation. Mark was listed as a permitted occupant, a status that could be revoked with 24 hours' notice in the event of a dissolution of domestic partnership or breach of corporate housing policy. The credit. I opened my American Express portal. Mark was an authorized user on my Platinum card. I didn't cancel the card. Not yet. I lowered his limit to $100. Let him try to buy Elena another round of Macallan and watch the Titan shrink when the waiter returns with a declined slip. By 2 a.m., I had emailed my attorney, a woman who billed $900 an hour and enjoyed every penny of it. The subject line: immediate dissolution and asset recovery. I wasn't just filing for divorce. I was repossessing a lifestyle. I looked at the $5,000 Zenith watch still sitting on the counter. It was a beautiful piece of machinery. I decided I'd keep it for myself, or perhaps sell it and donate the proceeds to a charity for women in business. Mark wouldn't be needing to keep time anymore. Where he was going, the days would be very, very long. At 3:15 a.m., I heard the soft click of the front door. Mark walked in, smelling of expensive tobacco and the perfume of a woman who didn't know his credit score was currently cratering. He saw me sitting on the sofa, the iPad still glowing on the marble island behind me. "Sarah, why are you still up?" He tried for a weary, hard-working tone, but the adrenaline of the night made his voice pitch higher. "I told you, it was a brutal night. The partners were relentless." "I'm sure they were, Mark," I said. I didn't get up. I just watched him. Did the partners enjoy the rooftop view, or was that just for Elena? The silence that followed was absolute. He didn't even try to lie at first. The sheer shock of hearing her name stripped him of his executive mask. He looked at the iPad, then back at me. The color didn't just drain from his face, it evaporated. Sarah, listen, it was a networking thing. Elena is just a junior. She needed a mentor, and... You're right about one thing, Mark, I interrupted, standing up. She does need a mentor, but not in finance. She needs a lesson in due diligence. She thinks she's dating a man with a penthouse and an Audi. She's actually dating a man who doesn't own the socks he's wearing. I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up the $5,000 Zenith watch. I turned it over in my hands, the light catching the sapphire crystal. This was your Valentine's gift, but I realized tonight that I've already given you enough. I've given you 5 years of a life you couldn't afford. The promotion is over. You're being hysterical, he hissed, his panic turning into a desperate aggression. You can't just throw away a marriage over some messages. We have a life here. No, Mark. I have a life here. I corrected him. You have a corporate housing agreement that I revoked 60 minutes ago. The Audi? It's being picked up by a recovery service in 4 hours. And that burger you were going to bring me? I hope you saved it, because it's the last meal you'll be eating on my budget. The aggression in Mark's eyes died instantly, replaced by the frantic, darting look of a trapped animal. He lunged for his phone, likely to check his banking app or call Elena, but his fingers fumbled. You're bluffing, he whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. You can't just revoke my life. We're married, Sarah. Half of this is mine. Check the prenuptial agreement, Section 4. Assets held under corporate entity or a design group, I said, leaning back against the marble that I, and only I, had paid for. You signed it because you wanted to show me you weren't after my money. Or perhaps you were just too busy imagining yourself in the driver's seat to realize I kept the keys. He finally got his phone open. I watched his face as he saw the notification from American Express. A $100 limit. Then, he saw the email notification from the building's concierge. His key fob access would be deactivated at 8 a.m. sharp. Sarah, please, he stammered, his voice cracking. The executive was gone. He was the man in the polyester suit again. I made a mistake. The gala... It was just an ego thing. I felt small next to you. Do you know what it's like to have your wife be the everything, while you're just the +1? I know exactly what it's like to be the everything, Mark. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm just tired of the overhead. He started pacing, grabbing a suitcase from the closet and throwing it onto the bed, then stopping, realizing he had nowhere to take it. No car, no credit, no partners who would take him in once they realized he'd lost his connection to my firm. The magnitude of his insolvency was finally sinking in. Mark stopped mid-pace, a designer shirt clutched in his hand like a white flag. You're really going to do this? Over a few texts? You're going to destroy my reputation at the firm? If you take the car and the apartment, I'll look like a fraud. You are a fraud, Mark, I said, my voice steady and cold. The only difference is that tomorrow, the world will finally see the balance sheet. You didn't just cheat on me. You embezzled my life. You took my dignity, my connections, and my resources and used them to buy a front row seat to your own ego. I walked toward him, and for the first time in our marriage, he actually stepped back. The power dynamic had shifted so violently he could feel the change in the air pressure. You told Elena I was not enough? I asked, tilting my head. I was enough to pay for your father's surgery last year. I was enough to hire the private jet for your executive retreat in Cabo. I was enough to keep you in a tax bracket you couldn't reach on your own in 3 lifetimes. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. The Audi is being remotely disabled as we speak. It won't start in the morning. When you try to call an Uber, your Amex will decline. And when you walk into that firm tomorrow, everyone will know that your senior partner status was just a courtesy extended to my husband, a title that expired at midnight. You're a monster, he spat, though his eyes were brimming with tears of self-pity. No, Mark, I'm a businesswoman, and I'm currently liquidating a failing asset. I checked my Cartier watch. It's 4 a.m. You have 4 hours to pack what you can carry. I suggest you start with the clothes you actually paid for. Though, if I recall correctly, that leaves you with about 2 pairs of gym shorts and a t-shirt from college. He looked at the Italian marble, the vaulted ceilings, and the life he'd treated like a disposable commodity. He wasn't mourning us. He was mourning the perks. "Go to your mother's, Mark," I said, turning my back on him. "I hear the couch is very grounded. Just the way you said you liked me." Monday morning arrived with the clinical clarity of a bank statement. I watched from the floor-to-ceiling windows as the recovery flatbed arrived to take the Audi. Mark stood on the curb, 2 bulging suitcases at his feet, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had been evicted from a dream he couldn't afford. I didn't watch him leave. I had a 9 a.m. call with my board of directors. Within 48 hours, the Mark brand had completely collapsed. The firm, sensing the sudden withdrawal of my design group's influence and realizing Mark's lifestyle was a house of cards, moved him to a windowless office in the basement before eventually restructuring his position entirely. Elena, I heard, stopped returning his calls the moment his American Express Platinum was cut into pieces. Turns out she wasn't in love with Mark. She was in love with the life I had curated for him. I spent the weekend redecorating. I didn't just change the locks, I changed the energy. The Italian marble no longer felt like a stage for his performances. It felt like the foundation of my own empire. I sold the $5,000 watch and used the money to fund a scholarship for female entrepreneurs. It felt poetic, using the ashes of a failing man to fuel the fire of someone who actually intended to build something real. I am no longer a silent investor. I am the sole proprietor. And for the first time in 5 years, the books are perfectly balanced. In the world of high-stakes business, they say you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. I ignored that rule in my marriage, and it nearly cost me my identity. I learned the hard way that when you build a pedestal for a small man, he doesn't look up to you. He just looks down on everyone else. If you've ever been the silent investor in someone who didn't deserve your capital, let this be your sign to audit your life. Hit that like button if you believe in knowing your worth, and share this with someone who needs to hear that enough is a baseline, not a goal. Subscribe for more stories of justice, strategy, and reclaiming the throne. Because at the end of the day, it's better to be alone in a penthouse you own than trapped in a lie you're subsidizing.